Welcome back. The new Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller Mike McCord will be one of the leaders at the table as the department figures out how to break up the Chief Management Office at the Defense Department. McCord said at his confirmation hearing that breakup would be one of his top jobs. Beth McGrath is Managing Director at Deloitte Consulting. She's former Deputy Chief Management Officer at the Department of Defense. And for folks who on whom the terminology is lost, Beth, you essentially were the CMO when you were there, if not in title, in function. What are some of the pieces in that office that you dealt with that people might not be thinking of or expecting to be on the list to have to move somewhere?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And, it's important to understand, I'll just say a little bit of history of why the office was established. And it was really to get a better focus on the business enterprise of the Defense Department. So as they're looking at things like business systems and defense-wide program, data, and the broader reform initiatives, it's really important that they understand it from an enterprise holistic perspective.
Some of the functions seem obvious. Some of the financial management functions, it would seem to be most sensible to go to Mike's office. Some of the information technology functions, it would seem to make sense to go to the CIO's office. What are some of the ones that you think might be harder to place, and what's the logic that you would like to see the department apply to help place those, Beth?
Yeah, and again, I think probably the most important thing is to remember who the I'll say the requirements and the outcome responsibility, where that falls, and it's really with the business owners. And so while even the CMO was a focal point for the enterprise to drive, analytics change, business architecture, and those kinds of things, it was the business owners who really had the responsibility and needed to be engaged in the conversation. So I think while it sounds logical that technology things would go to the CIO, I think divorced of the business owners, then that will, irrespective of where those things went, it would not work. And so I think it is not as simple as moving the what seems to be logical pieces into place. I think it's really to better understand sort of how it all fits together and how do you drive holistic change across the department.
We are beyond the point, obviously, of debating or litigating whether the office should stand down or whether it shouldn't. It's going away. What are the best practices tactically for moving the pieces that have to move and settling them into their new locations, Beth?
Yeah, and I think last time we talked, I said probably a couple of times the department's a big place and it's highly complex, and it's a mission-focused organization. And so understanding sort of the organization and the design of the organization, and in sort of today's terminology, you would talk about looking at the operating model. So irrespective of where things sit, understanding sort of the business the processes, sort of people, process, technology, they're always part of the mix. I think Mike mentioned in his confirmation hearing, skill sets are really important. Do you have them? Where do they reside? Are you using them the way you should? And then the structure. So once you understand how are you going to get the stuff done, really then understanding the structure, and then certainly governance. I think governance, if I was to say one thing they need to get right, is the governance piece.
How to get right the governance piece, though, Beth? What is the indicator at some point during some progress report during the chain or at the end to determine whether the governance is being correctly applied?
Of course, it's not a simple answer when it comes to the Defense Department, but certainly leadership engagement will be critical. So it seems like Deputy Secretary Hicks is engaging, as is Ms. McCord and others as they arrive and confirm. It's the clarity of objective, leadership at the table, transparency and accountability, and then skin in the game across many of the business owners. I also think incentives will play a role here. It's hard to change, as we talked about last time, but having the proper incentives in place, again, transparency and accountability will be key.
We have a little bit more than a minute left, Beth. What does a successful outcome look like well, it's probably got, I was going to say 5 years, but the CMO office didn't really have 5 years to determine its success. So what does success look like 2 years from now or 3 years from now, Beth?
Yeah, I wish my crystal ball was, super exact, but again, I think speed to, put the new process and procedures in place is important. I think that, as we discussed last time, change is hard, and so moving deliberately, I'm not saying rush to failure, but I am saying move deliberately and fast. Clarity on these roles and responsibilities, making sure you've got enterprise-wide governance and transparency so that people understand it's still important to the leadership of the department, it's still important to the administration, and they need to move out.
Beth McGrath, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Francis.